From there, let me start with Mr. Gesa.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, NTV. Yes, we are, I wouldn't say we are through elections. We are still moving and analyzing and looking at this and the other. Of course, in my area, I always look at what we had then and what we have now. And the security implications, the security issues, because this move within an election, of course, security is very important because it spells into the fairness of the progress and the progress of an election. Yeah. So to me, that's where I want to focus and eliminate in that area, because I still believe that as Ugandans, we have to create our own democracy. We have to create our own procedures, and we have to appear like, we should not just appear, but we should literally build a system that some of us, as old as we are, will leave to those who will come after us. Okay. Yes.
Speaking of democracy, did you have the opportunity to exercise your democratic right to vote?
Of course I did. Though with some bit of difficulty,
what was your experience where you voted from?
Of course, there was a lot of excitement. That's one. Two, I think there was a situation of, I wouldn't call it over deployment, but a very great, big presence of security personnel. Mm-hmm. And it's like there are also some pockets of kind of engagements between the security personnel and the youths. And all this, of course, I don't know if there will be that time when maybe we'll be just voting through electronics,
yeah,
so that we don't. There is no physical contact.
Interaction.
Interaction has brought a lot of problems, because these are young people. The forces are young. The youths are also there, and there was some kind of rubbing. But compared to what we had in 2021, I think there's some level of improvement.
Okay, that's a very interesting analysis.
Yes.
The voter is young and the security officer is also young. That is definitely a serious clash that we need to have an address to. Mr. Byamukama, in your perspective, as you giving us your open remarks, what was your voting experience like?
Yes, good morning, Regina. Good morning, viewers. It is a pleasure to be here with you today once again. So my experience and, from the election period is that I voted, first of all, because it is my duty as a citizen of Uganda to vote. So I went to Kagadi. I took a holiday to Kagadi, voted all the local leaders, all the presidential candidates, so the ones I preferred, and most probably many of them won. I may not say all of them, but many of them won. So I want to take this opportunity to congratulate fellow citizens that we are almost getting done with the much anticipated election, so which is always sometimes very tricky, but we are almost getting done, and the government is now focusing on managing the post-election situations, depending on the dynamics outside there. So, as the citizens, it is always our duty to go and vote. That's why I took a holiday, an entire holiday to Kagadi, moved with the candidates that I preferred, voted for them, did all my responsibilities, all my duties as a noble citizen.
What were the security issues that you observed in Kagadi?
Well, in Kagadi, the elections were free and fair. The dynamics in Kagadi do not reflect anywhere near the ones existing here in the city. So Kagadi is very calm, like all the entirety and the neighborhoods. Kagadi, Hoima, when you go to Chenjojo, all those districts are very calm. The security situation is very calm. There was no police brutality or military intervention in the elections. There was no any interference from the security operatives. Okay. Like we have had claims in around the city, or urban centers that are in the central region. So Kagadi is very calm, has been calm ever since the election period. and up to now.
All right, these gentlemen are joining me on our Kickstarter this morning to examine security and democracy in Uganda. So we're going to be examining one of the most consequential questions in Uganda's political life. Can democracy truly thrive, especially where security institutions and political powers appear increasingly intertwined? That being said, for decades, critics argue that Uganda's democracy space has steadily narrowed, marking the visible presence of armed security personnel during elections, even after elections, restrictions on opposition activity, and of course the growing role of military in civilian governance. Supporters of the current order, however, insist that stronger security institutions are essential to stability, they are essential to peace as well as national cohesion. Now, at the heart of this debate is a very fundamental question that I hope my guests will be answering at the end of this discussion. Where does legitimate security end, and where do political controls begin? To interrogate this question, allow us to first set the scene and look to our history books. Before we turn to the realities, important to understand the militarization of Uganda's governance and where it emerged from, because it did happen overnight. It did happen in 2021. It did just happen in 2026. It has a history of where it has come from. So historically speaking, you're looking to the pre-colonial kingdoms having maintained standard or standing armies as instruments of power and territorial control. Then came the British colonial rule for us here in Uganda, entrenching militarized governance through the King's African Rifles, embedding coercion as a tool of administration rather than consent. So more or less like, slavery of sorts. And then post-independence, post-1962, we saw Uganda having successive military takeovers, not democratic takeovers. From Milton Obote's reliance on force, Idi Amin's outright military dictatorship, that's to mention but a few. So in 1986, you do have the NRA takeover while framing itself as a liberation, which Liberation Day was celebrated yesterday, institutionalizing the military as the ultimate guarantor of a political order was something that we'll have an analysis of if it was a step in the right direction. So the historical trajectory is raising critical questions. Has Uganda even ever fully demilitarized its politics, or merely rebranded the military dominance within the civilian structures? And so that's where we start off our conversation. Mr. Fred Egesa, could you help us marry the history of Uganda and militarization to where we are today?
Thank you so much. Of course, when the colonialists came here, they found us with some kind of they found some kind of security here in terms of, we had our ancestors and our chiefs had their own sets of military kind of forces for purposes of preserving the kingdoms, the chiefdoms, and so many other things. But even before we can go there, we could start with the United States, which is the image of the whole world in terms of security. Look at Trump. Trump is not talking because they have much more money. Trump is talking because he has built an army. So an army has always been built at the last as a coercive force. It is there to kind of make sure that every other, it puts someone at the center of strength. It puts someone at the center of control. It puts someone at the center of protection. If you talk about a good economics, the army has to be in. If you talk about politics, the army has to be there. If you talk about wars and so many other things, soldiers are not there just to go and maybe fight and or whatever, but they are kind of a standby force for purposes of implementing the wills of the state, or the wheels of the power that are. That's why you see Clinton can fly up to Venezuela, pick their president, and bring him back, bring him to America. Of course, a situation that would be an international kind of an abuse, but he has done it. So it's not like when we look at forces here, we should know that forces were built as coercion forces in Africa. That's why at a certain stage, people like me could not qualify to join the army because of I'm like 5.9 feet. They used to take people like, they used to take all the 6-footers. People with 6 foot above. Why? They wanted someone muscular. They wanted someone with strong enough to fight. They are never, you know, when you look at the way soldiers and forces are trained, they are not so much. They're kind of one. If you are being trained, they first of all wash away much of what has been, what you have been, what has what has been built in you, and then whoever wants to take you as his force will kind of program you in such a way that you take orders. You don't need to deeply analyze and reason around these orders. You're supposed to take the orders. Why? Because someone is building a force for purposes of enforcing whatever he would wish to have. Now, in that case, when the colonialists came here, they went to the tribes like, they went to Acholi, they went to Lango, they went to Eastern, and picked the strongest. Why? Because much of the businesses we had then had been to slave trade. There were fights to take territory and whatever. So fighting has been an integral part of the African states, and of course the way it was introduced by the colonialists is the way somehow, somewhere, it has been maintained. You know, they are telling us about several changes, this and this and the other, but they have gone through so much to learn that being coercive, being forceful, being abusive is not the best. But for us, we're just at the primary stage of appreciating peace. So it is very, very likely that forces.
How long are we going to stay in this primary stage of appreciating peace? As long
as we do not realize the dangers of using coercive force, we will be there.
What are some of those dangers?
Like, of course, hatred. If you use force on people, you leave marks. You leave kind of hatred marks that may definitely at one time turn against you or your people or the nation. Now, it is a kind of seed you are planting which you may never fully deal with in time, because as we age, I was young yesterday, but now I'm an old man. If I've been abusive, if I've been coercive, if I've been if I've lacked control in my own operations, definitely I will suffer as an old man.
Okay.
So you cannot, as much as we have this, it is our own time as Africans to go into research and find out how best we can develop a force without being abusive, without dealing with whatever we're doing. Because if we train these people the way Americans and others have trained them, Americans do not hurt Americans. They always go and do all their whatever in other places, but they're always very protective of Americans. Here we have not crossed that line of knowing that a Ugandan should be protected, and we can be aggressive with the opponent,
ideally
the enemy. But
I'm being a Uganda right now through your submission, and I'm trying to go through the pictures I've had of the presence of security and security forces in our recently concluded elections. You know, the military boots that were on ground in our communities before elections and during and after elections. That definitely did stir a lot of fear. It did stir, you know, there was not any kindness in people's hearts,
definitely,
for their presence.
And you know, I've looked at this. Most of these guys who are in operation, they have masks. Why do you put on masks? It's an indicator that you are not going to do good things. Okay. And in such a way, you also believe that there may be some kind of repercussions. But you're dealing with your own people. Open your face, do the right thing, and nobody will accuse you.
Speaking of repercussions, in the Daily Monitor's paper today, top JAT officer named in armed robbery probe. The arrest follows the shootout in Chira municipality, in which police recovered a gun belonging to an anti-terrorism unit. That's where the realities are coming. And these are these are guys that were constantly covered while we're going through our election period, is primarily through the campaigns. Richard, through your lenses, please draw for us the interlinkage between security and politics, security and economics.
Thank you, Regina. So to me, I believe everything in Uganda. You see, I have had a chance to do some courses in managing public security and the rule of law. So under managing public security, many public security institutions, for example, the army, the police, and the intelligence, have their own core mandates. So they have their governing principles. For example, the police is governed by the Constitution and the Police Act. The military is governed by the Constitution and the UPDF Act. So the intelligence agencies are managed by the Security Organizations Act. So each actor in managing public security is regulated. So if we are to focus on what has been happening, you see, the militarization of politics, militarizing the politics of Uganda started way back during the regimes of Kayihura, because the post-colonial military involvement in politics was purely a military affair, that governments came and were overthrown by the military. So that's what we saw. So there was also use of some military excesses when Obote used the military to attack the Ruviri, the kingdom headquarters of Uganda and all that. But we are seeing it grow in contemporary times, because right now the Constitution is there regulating all these, the formation of all these security actors, but we are seeing a lot of excesses. So the military is not, military getting involved in politics is bad. It is a bad venture, which is bad by the law, and by not any government legitimizes military involvement in politics, because when you legitimize it, you create avenues for military indiscipline, where you will see issues of brutality, coups, juntaism, which we are yet to go back to juntaism if we don't regulate military involvement in politics. So there is when the military started coming into politics, it was during the regime.
So Richard, I'm going to ask you to hold your school of thought there. We are being joined by a reporter who is on ground. Today is elections, and so we do have regional correspondents that are giving us a picture of the atmosphere and the state of security as the polls do open for the other elective leadership structures in local government. We're being joined by Julius Ochen, who is in Alebtong. Now, Alebtong is having two elections. They do have, of course, district leadership levels there, but also uniquely for today, there's a re-election in Ajuri County, where you do have NRM's Samson Abua going for a re-election after recounting of votes was not an option for them in the parliamentary elections that were recently concluded. So they will be going to the polls. 18 polling stations will be opened today to facilitate the re-election of a parliamentary candidate for that area code. And so we want to find out what is the update in that regard. Julius, good morning to you.
Very, very good morning, viewers. Julius Chen coming live from Alebtong district. Right now I'm standing at our sub-county headquarters, and the materials for voting arrived here about 5 minutes ago. And as you can see behind, we have voters already there. I can see even the security personnel here and other officials. This voting which is taking place, it took place on the 15th of last month, and during that time there were some challenges during the voting. It was during the counting, it was found out that 18 polling stations, the declaration forms were missing, and the Electoral Commission had to reschedule the voting today, and that's why this voting is here today. And as you can see, I have a guest that is none other than the RDC of this area, who is also the chairperson for security, and is Mr. Geoffrey.
Yes.
Okiswa.
Yes. Yeah, I'm Geoffrey Okiswa, the resident district commissioner for Alebtong.
You're welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
RDC.
Thank you.
Alebtong district.
Yes.
Tell me, what's the security here in Alebtong?
No, the security is tight, and as head of the security committee, we did not want to take anything for granted to ensure that peace is guaranteed to all our voters, particularly here in Away sub-county and Abako sub-county, where we had some polling stations disputed on the 15th voting, to the extent that we did not have the area member of parliament celebrated in two success. And the Electoral Commission, in its own meetings, made the deduced conclusion to postpone the elections. We call it a rerun, and the rerun was pushed to 27th, that is today, Tuesday, which is a very, very sensitive day today for us here, a day with a lot of anxiety. For the last 2 nights, people were moving up and down with the appetite of campaigning, but Electoral Commission said no campaigns, because campaigns stopped sometimes back on the 13th of January, and for now it would be just a matter of reminding voters, moving from a person to a person and the like. So campaigns were not allowed, but there was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of anxiety, particularly from the two candidates. That is the Honorable Government Chief Whip, that is Honorable Dennis Hampson Oboa, and then that is representing the NRM. That is the NRM flag bearer. Then we had the Jalameso Fred, that is for UPC. But I am very, very happy that they adhered to the call from Electoral Commission, and they did not have campaigns. Right. But what they had was a lot of movements, and which culminated into threats, hate speech, and speculations onto violence and the like. And that is why, for us, we had meetings, preparatory meetings.
I'm taking you back when I already see.
Yes.
Was there some disciplinary measures taken on those who could have made this happen?
Oh yes, oh yes. First of all, probably I should have started with that. On the 15th, while tallying went on very well in most of the polling stations in Moroto County and then Ajuri County, when it came to Away sub-county, 17 polling stations were disputed too by Jalameso Fred, who said, no, I object.
So they were told the declaration forms?
Yes, he objected to those declaration forms, 17 from Away sub-county and 1 from Abako. The Electoral Commission said it's okay, dispute or conflict is inevitable. What we can only do is to consult with the Electoral Commission. So after consultation, they put aside those polling stations, and that is why we are on a rerun. But of course, somebody somehow took responsibility, because in these polling stations we had presiding officers, we also had police constables, so we also had the OC station of Away. What was done was to summon them, to tell them that can you take responsibility over this. They made statements, and we opened a general inquiry file. Now that GF file is going on. We have the release on bond.
About the returning officer?
Yeah, even the returning officer, because they all in the same lineup take responsibility, either by commission or omission. And they shouldn't really run away from the responsibilities.
Okay, lastly now, why heavy deployment of security?
Oh yes, we received the very disturbing information from intelligence that we have many of our colleagues from the neighboring districts that are taking a lot of interest in the elections in Ajuri.
Okay.
And
thank you.
And they were
Thank
preparing.
You so much. I have to cut it short because I RDC due to time constraint. Okay. That has been the RDC of Alebtong District Junior Chain reporting in Alebtong here for NTV. Good morning. Back in Kampala.
Alebtong looking at the re-election, and it was ordered because results declared at different tallying centers were not tallying, and then figures recorded on the official DR forms were also quite a discrepancy there. So in some cases, actually, the Electoral Commission officials did report finding empty ballot boxes where voting materials were expected, and this raised concerns of integrity, where you did have the leading candidate at the time, Fred Jalameso, coming out to actually petition the Electoral Commission, arguing that the originally announced results did not tally with the polling station records, and hence the rerun that we have this morning, the contest being between the two men, Fred Jalameso, who's for the Uganda People's Congress and main opposition challenger, against the incumbent Hamson Dennis Obua, who's for the NRM and the government chief whip. And so that's how things are standing in Ajuri County. So as we do continue on, of course, they have given us the state of elections and how they're building up there. While we were in studio, Richard here was still giving us a preamble on to what point did our politics as a country become militarized under the NRM rule.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I was telling you that when the politics was being militarized under the regimes of Kaihura, so the police usually quotes Article 212 Clause D of the Constitution that allows, the police to cooperate with other security agencies, but I have never seen any provision under the Police Act or in the Constitution that legitimizes the deployment of the military in managing law and order and suppressing revolts on streets. It is not there. So it is just because maybe we have a fragile parliament that cannot question the mandate of the military or the mandate of the police. So, but the principle, the fundamental principle has always been that if you are a military officer and you want to involve yourself in politics, you get out of uniform, become a civilian, then take part and passion in politics. So that has been the fundamental principle of the Constitution here, that the military is never ever in any country that is under rule of law or democracy or democratic.
You actually mentioned something that we saw, in reality through these elections, a military officer who was under the Fisheries Protection Unit, who came out in uniform campaign for the ruling government, and of course she was put aside later on by the military. She was put aside in terms of leadership, and another officer was appointed in her position. That being said, Richard, then this begs the question, are there structure flaws that are allowing security personnel to actually have a dominance on our political landscape today in Uganda, especially through the Constitution that you're referring to?
No, never, because managing public security is when you are managing it, you have to manage it according to the law. So when you see the provisions, the existing provisions, they can't suppress the entire voices of the citizenry, never. So under Section 28 of the Police Act, so it is only where a police officer is allowed to carry a weapon while going on duty. So, but we are seeing a lot of excesses being carried out by security officers using weapons. So you see, these guns are just tools of keeping law and order, but it is not a policy. So, but in Uganda, it has become a policy that, guns.
No, but that's the reality, because people have died. You have rubber bullets, but why use live ammunition during such processes?
It has become a policy, and I believe we should condemn it. We can do better. So, because
Mr. Gesa, in that regard, how has it become a policy? And by this, we're trying to interrogate the structure foundations that lead us to where we are today. Case in point, through this election cycle that we are closing, we saw two security agencies. According to the electoral laws and the Constitution, the primary leader in security should be the Uganda police for our elections, and should there be any need, then they can call upon the assistance of the UPDF. But we saw an incident where the CDF... I'm coming.
There is no provision in the Constitution or any other, or in the Police Act, that entails the Uganda police to call the army. Never.
Okay.
Never anyway.
Well, so now those are the loopholes that we want to understand as Uganda. You see the CDF coming out to put out a call to action and tell people that after you're done with your voting, please go home. But yet you do have the electoral laws stating that home is anywhere 20 meters after a given polling station. And then you see the IGP coming out to just add voice to what the CDF has said. In other words, changing on who's the actual director and who's the actual leader of the state of security and its management and the management of law and order. So it begs the question, where do these structural weaknesses actually lie for us today that we can have the leniency and the provocation and the results that we are speaking of?
There are two things. Maybe I may start with the last statement about the orders to go home, orders to do this and the other around the election time. Yes, we, of course, in security we look at so many things, like what may be the resultants if people voted, and then after voting, they stayed around, like in big numbers. We have NRM, another in thousands. We have in thousands, all of them around the centers. And these are young men. So to me, asking them to go home may not have been so bad, because there was a kind of a security precaution. And because sometimes we definitely have to look at the realities of life. Should the people stay there under the circumstance that we're dealing with young people, excited, maybe they are voting for the first time, for the second time, and maybe they have not even seen that sometimes we may kind of hit a boiling point because of this kind of allowed association. So asking these people to go home, to me, I still believe was okay, or get off, give some kind of space, because people had they had the representatives who are like those who are monitoring. Yes, but it is also another situation when people go home and then security comes in very close, and then there is a fracas or this and the other, or like what was in Mukono when someone was forced to chase a small car and then bash it and a few things. So what we are talking about here is what has been happening in Uganda may not just leave us like a miracle. Well, in 1966, I think it could have been 4 years, I had the first bullets. And the gun has been an integral weapon, not even a tool. The gun in Uganda is not a tool, it's a weapon. And the gun has been in every change, in every operation. In fact, wherever there is a situation, now there is a gun. It's like it has become a national kind of stick. You work with, like teachers used to work with sticks, primary school teachers. Here, there has to be a gun. And what does a gun say? The gun kind of creates a situation of he who carries a gun, there's a way he feels that he's above, he's very great. And he who does not have a gun feels like this one is an aggressor. So it's very likely that there could be a spark here and there. For over 60 years, which I've lived beyond the 60 years in this country, and I've seen that guns have been at the center of every change. There's been that kind of spirit. And when you look at the way the president came in, as a young man, he mastered the importance of a gun in every situation of politics. And that's how, of course, we have always talked about over-militarization of the public, bringing guns into existence, military police handling people. What I know is in a situation that is beyond. There is what we call there is a word used whereby military may come in to support police in case there is a situation like what was in Kasese, that that team came out and started kind of killing policemen and so many other things. The military comes in as a supporting force. It may not be in the constitution as my brother said, but it is a prudent kind of direction that the military will come in to support the police. But when they come in, the question is who should be who should be on the lead, who should take whose orders.
Yeah.
Have we bothered to teach our policemen, our military people?
And you see, the thing that you've mentioned, who should take whose orders, is confusing us, the public, because people are wondering now whose orders do you follow? You do have the local structure of security does exist. No. Then you do have the police structure that exists, then the UPDF. But those lines have actually been lost in translation and in affecting the peace and stability that we talk about, and not only on national level, but now it's trickled down to a household level.
Excuse me.
Let him first finish.
Of course, what I've always talked about, why sometimes we've talked our voices hoarse, is to let the powers that are appreciate that some of these things we are doing, we can learn from our own mistakes.
What does it take for them to appreciate?
Well, I think sometimes time, sometimes experience, sometimes even mistakes. Because putting in more guns has now made everybody to believe that a gun is a requirement. Most of our MPs have guns. Most of them are guarded. And go wherever you may go, most of our vehicles move with guns. That's why there is indiscipline on the road and so many things. Now, if we don't come up with a gun policy now and deal with it, we may turn to, eventually the gun will start eating up the lives of our own people. Okay. So the way we should study we should have our own study about the issue of the use of the gun and the use of the militarization of the public.
And when you say that, when you say we should have our own study, it begs an even bigger question: who should be having these studies and who should be conducting these studies? That is, but Ugandans don't have that right. They don't have that power. If they're being coiled by what we are seeing today, you've talked about the arbitrary arrests, the reported beatings, the direct security involvement. It's no longer even in our campaigns or politics. I mean, elections. It's now really politics. You saw, comments that were coming in from the opposition leader's wife saying that, why did she marry a Muganda man? Why did she leave all the men in her territory to marry him? That is how bad it is. But we'll come to that. Richard, I know that you want to make a defense there. Critics are pointing to the 2025 UPDF amendment bill, which authorizes the trial of civilians in military courts once again, a decisive shift towards militarized governance for us as a country. Does this legislation represent a constitutional necessity for security?
Well, military tribunals do exist in various states. Many of the states have military tribunals, but these are tribunals, as you have heard, not courts. And it was very clear in the Supreme Court ruling where all the panel agreed with the constitutional provision that these military courts, military justice, should not succumb to civilians. Because these are tribunals, like we have tribunals for those who work in local governments, have tribunals, they are labor courts, they are those tribunals. So these military justice should not apply to ordinary civilians, because there are other courts of judicature that are mandated to try and litigate civilians. Okay. Yes. So when we are just living in a dilemma where everything is trying to be militarized, or where I'm a member of the NRM. I'm part and parcel of the NRM. I take part in the NRM activities, but we are living a paranoid life, which is not sustainable. We have to face the reality that face the challenge that each regime has challenges, that we face those challenges. So not living a paranoid life, because when paranoia grows, we shall start fearing even the citizens that we are mandated to govern.
Let me help you. That paranoia has already started happening. People are already living in fear.
Yes. Yeah. So if we militarize everything, we are inviting bad vices like coups and juntaism. Because if we start seeing military excesses everywhere, military, the justice, military, law and order, military, like what he has been saying, when there is complete breakdown of law and order, it is when the military comes in. So complete breakdown of law and order, like we have seen instances where the Kasese scenario, there was complete breakdown in law and order.
Okay.
So the military came in. So
the
overlapping mandate
to conclude this conversation.
So we have seen this security, the militarization of the security arena has caused overlapping mandate where each security agency is lost.
Is above.
No.
It's the orders from above.
Yeah. It has also generated order from
Richard,
above because there is no hierarchy of who is supposed to give orders.
As we're wrapping up this conversation, and this is a question to both of you, is Uganda's current trajectory as far as security is concerned and militarization reversible? And we're talking about meaningful security sector. Are there some reforms maybe we should be considering to ensure that the separation of powers? We've been talking about the separation of powers from the executive and the judiciary. Maybe now we also need to rethink separation of powers of security agencies, the different security organs in the country. Is there reversibility to this situation? Let me start with you, Fred.
Of course, you could see that we are in a kind of a period where we are facing political despair. People are very desperate. People literally, it has like politics has come, is now a kind of a job. It's like a kind of a clout. People want to be there. Like you would have seen, NRM was fighting NRM, NOP was fighting NRM, and several members of our what we call the honorables. So many of them even turned to be kind of used other underhand methods when they are voting, and they kind of suppressed others and so many other things. Now, if we are to look at that, yes, in Uganda, as we have gone we should also appreciate that we have moved. There are many chances that today you can talk about this and the other. Yes, we should appreciate the kind of progress we have made. We shouldn't say we have not made no progress, but we have made some progress, but at the same time, we should come to realize that whatever wrongs we do, we are planting a seed, and we may not live long enough to kind of harvest it, but our own children, our dear ones, will live our dear ones in a situation that may not be whatever.
All right.
We have heard about situations like sometimes the issues of like the CDF's utterances and so many things. These are things that are correctable. We have to kind of deal with the situation. In fact, we appeal the president to deal with all this, because
the fact that everything now has to be the president, everyone's going to the president, that alone is a structural fault, a structural loophole there.
To fix the basics now, we definitely have to appeal to him and say, please,
all right,
this situation is not good enough.
Your closing remarks on how reversible this situation can be.
Well, first of all, we have to rethink the core principles of democracy, because we have a constitution, and the police keeps quoting Article 212, Clause D of the Constitution. So let's revisit Article 212, Clause D of the Constitution, revise it to see if it exactly gives powers to the UPDF or the National Army to interfere in managing public security. No, never. So I don't see any provisions in that provision that mandates or that warrants the UPDF to come in and maintain law and order. So it is a core role of the police. So if the police has failed on its roles, or if it is a deliberate scheme by the state to manipulate the police and use the military in fulfilling its interests in suppressing dissent or managing public affairs. So the only cause of militarization of this the entire arena is Article 212 clause D of the Constitution.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard Byamukama. We bring the conversation to an end because it's a very critical conversation. It's a sensitive conversation, especially given the fact that we are still having elections going on at different elective levels. So can Ugandans have a free and fair election while security forces remain visibly involved in our political processes? That's a question that we're asking you on our social media platforms. So please go over there and give us your opinion. So as we are ending this conversation, one thing is clear. Security and democracy are not mutually exclusive, but neither can survive where one is overwhelming the other. That's where we leave it. What kind of peace do we want, and what democratic cost are we willing to pay? That's where we are as a country. Priscilla, Regina, Nalwoga.